Doesn't work?
Davide. Sorry. Dear colleagues, can we start?
Orange, sì.
Iniziamo, dai.
Sì, cominciamo. Let me...
Gentlemen, can you take the seat, please? We are starting now. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and participants of the Open Conference, welcome to the session dedicated to programs, projects and prospects for transport. First of all, I would like to thank all the previous honorable speakers and also the host of today's event here in Rome in the premises of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, of the Republic of Italy. My name is Eusair and I'm the Deputy Coordinator of TSG2 subgroup for transport from the Ministry of Construction, Transport and Infrastructure from the Republic of Serbia. And I will have the honor to chair today's session concerning programs, project and prospects for transport together with Mr. Pierluigi Coppola, the coordinator of the TSG subgroup for transport from the Republic of Italy, who is also one of the panelists today on today's session. Let's start this session by bringing some of the main aspects of transport issues in terms of Eusair macro-regional cooperation. Today, transport together with energy are crucial for achieving long-term stability, security and economic, social and regional development on the European continent, especially in the Adriatic-Ionian region, which is the topic today. The idea of developing of a strategic transport master plan for the Adriatic-Ionian region was already presented at the third forum of EU strategy held in Catania in 2018. The Transport Master Plan recognizes the major role of transport and has an aim to provide a strategic direction for the development of the multimodal transportation system up to time horizons 2030 and 2050. The Master Plan envisages the delivery of transport systems which are inclusive, safe, integrated, reliable and efficient for people and freight and able to support attractive urban and rural and coastal environments. Some of the main priorities of this year's Croatian presidency is the revision and re-evaluation of the Eusair, which will upgrade and bring to alignment with the new circumstances and easier implementation in the future. As for the political priorities of the Eusair initiative is engaging in stronger cooperation, which will enhance the development and prosperity among the countries and partners in Adriatic-Ionian region. On that note, I will give the floor to Mr. Roberto Zani, the Senior Multimodal Transport Planner and Project Director of T-Plan, to address us concerning Transport Master Plan of the Adriatic-Ionian region. Yeah. Where is...
Chairman, thank you very much for the floor. I would have a presentation that could support my speech today. Well, indeed, the idea of the Eusair Transport Master Plan dates back to some years ago, and the basic reason to have a master plan was to collect relevant information on the transport system in the region and try to get to a shared long-term strategic vision for the regional transport system. And you can see in this slide the path that is leading us to this shared vision, which started basically with the analysis of the current transport system, then the review of the existing national and international strategic plans, then the definition and simulation of different infrastructure scenarios for the development of the transport system of the Adriatic-Ionian region, and then also the identification in the end of projects that are relevant under the macro-regional perspective. The process involved the TSG members, but not only. That was also extended to several experts at the country level. Well, let me start then with the current needs that all the stakeholders somehow validated in a consultation process that took place at the beginning of this year. And I will do this by transport mode because the transport master plan is actually multimodal. So for maritime transport, we need to upgrade the basic infrastructure and to get more capacity at our ports. We need also to digitalize the transport system and also the logistic chains that involve the ports in the Adriatic and Ionian region. Last mile connections are very much important, not just the very last stretch, but also the main interconnecting lines that are connecting the ports with the major capital cities, not just for freight, but also for passenger transport, because we need multimodal routes to be operational. And then there is also a problem of old fleets and limited diffusion of alternative fuels, because in our region we also have a lot of islands and ferry services, but the fleet that is operating is old. Inland waterways, we should try to make inland waterways navigable all over the year. We need development of port terminals and yards. Again, improvement of last mile connections, telematic applications for traffic management, and improvement of sustainability of operations. For air transport, rail connections to airports is becoming more and more important. The possibility to supply energy to aircraft while during stationary operations is also important under the environmental standpoint, and also the implementation of air traffic management systems that is also implemented by the joint undertaking CESAR. In urban nodes, it was already mentioned today, are becoming more and more important. Here the needs are to expand the public transport networks, availability of alternative clean fuels for public transport services, but also for private transport, developing sustainable urban mobility plans in those cities where these are still missing, and also increase the diffusion of sustainable solution for urban logistics. The road network is of course to be upgraded, especially in the eastern part of the region and in Western Balkans. The issue of safety is quite important for this area, and we know this also since the activities that started with CETO in the past. It's not just a problem of today, but it's a quite permanent problem in the area. Urban bypasses are also an issue, and also improvement of cross-border operations to reduce of course travel times. The rail network, it was already mentioned, specifically in Western Balkans we have several issues. We need to improve, of course, the condition of the infrastructure, not just for speed, but also for electrification. We also have several single line tracks. So there are also some missing links. If we look also at the completion of the TEN-T network, telematic applications are again important for traffic management, which is also useful to increase capacity, and also the lack of intermodal terminals. Indeed, we have very limited railroad terminals, especially in the eastern part of the region. As part of the activities that are related to the development of the master plan, a multimodal transport model was also constructed, which was used to assess the characteristics and the condition of the infrastructure and simulate the future scenarios. The model is indeed a multimodal one. It covers passenger and freight transport, rail transport, and also road, both public and private transport. The model covers basically the entire region, and it also covers whole Europe in terms of external zones. What was the purpose of using the model? Well, describe and evaluate the current status and performance of the railway network, assess the impact of a total of 127 rail and 150 road projects that were identified by reviewing the national plans and strategies by the different member states, so the different countries involved. And in the end, identify possible gaps and define projects to improve connectivity in the region. The indicators that we used for the analysis are, one is related basically to the infrastructure. It's an interconnectivity index. It's basically it's basically assessing improving the performance of the transport system by reducing travel times. And the other one is related to demand, and it's actually the modal share. We simulated different scenarios. So first of all, the base year that was implemented for 2017. Then three different master plan scenarios. First of all, the baseline scenario, where we have all the rail and road projects that are ongoing and are fully financed. Then the planned projects, so the ones that together with the baseline projects are already included in the national plans and strategies, but they are still not fully defined and did not start yet. And then some additional projects. What is very positive is that in the end, the planning activity by all the countries is very good. So it's very pertinent because it's effective in solving all the accessibility issues in the area. So we only added 5 rail and 8 road projects that I will then further explain in the next slides. Then we also added a TEN-T scenario, so basically assuming that all the projects that are going to be implemented will fulfill the requirements set in the new TEN-T regulation, I mean the new proposal. So 100 kilometers for speed for freight and 160 for passengers. Why we decided to do this? Because according to our review of the projects, not all the projects are actually respecting these requirements. And we just wanted to understand what would be the implication of reaching the full standards compared to the master plan scenarios. Here you can see the results, the outcome of the model analysis for interconnectivity for all the different scenarios that we simulated. The percentages that you can see in both tables for road and rail transport are related to the population that are living in areas that are showing a specific interconnectivity index by bandwidth. You can see, of course, that the implementation of the projects is going to improve significantly the interconnectivity indexes in the area. If we look at rail, you can see that the TEN-T completion, so assuming that the standards will be fulfilled, will significantly increase the interconnectivity index in the area compared to the master plan. For road transport, we can also see that there will be significant improvements. You may notice that for some scenarios, we may even get some indicators in the future that are, lower than in the previous scenario. This is due to the fact that we are also simulating or taking into consideration in this index congestion. Because both for rail and road transport, as we mentioned before, there are still single-track railway lines, and also the road projects are not all foreseeing the implementation of motorways or expressway roads. So basically, there might be a need to expand, of course, the capacity in the future. Here it is just to show on a map how is the situation and how it will evolve in the future. So you can see that the base here is showing significant gaps for rail, especially in the Western Balkans. The dark brown areas are the ones where we don't have railway infrastructure at all. With the master plan scenario, connectivity indexes will improve all over the region. We mentioned that very few projects have been added to the ones that are already planned, and these are related to the interconnection between Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro and Albania, then the connection between Sarajevo and Ploce, and in Greece the connection with Turkey and the link to the port of Igoumenitsa that is still disconnected from the rail network. This is the map where you can see the situation in case the TEN-T standards will be actually fulfilled. So you can see, of course, that the network will significantly be better in terms of performance. Some of the gaps in terms of rail connectivity in Greece might also be solved by the completion of the comprehensive network by 2050. If we look at the road network, the situation is pretty similar. Again, we have gaps in Western Balkan areas. The completion of the master plan scenario, so meaning all the baseline and planned projects will solve most of the gaps. In the case of road, the few projects that have been added are the ones that are needed to complete the Adriatic-Ionian corridor, and then again the Sarajevo-Ploce and the Podgorica, a section in the Podgorica-Sarajevo corridor. Similarly to what may happen with rail transport, if we would implement all projects assuming that all roads will be at least 2 lanes per direction, then of course the situation will be much better in the future. The indicators for modal share, well, we start in the base year with 78% of car modal share, and 12% for buses, and less than 12% for buses, and less than 10% for rail transport. You can see that the process will improve the indicators, but yes, we have of course some challenges. It was already mentioned. We are in a developing economic area, so motorization indexes are of course growing, so this is also a factor that is to be taken into consideration. We can also see that with the improvement of the rail infrastructure, part of public transport by road will move to rail transport. Moving to freight transport modal share, here we can see that the impact is a bit more significant. So we will go from 13% to 17% with the master plan scenario, 18% with the TEN-T scenario. I would like to point out that this is an average for the whole region, but we will have countries where the rail modal share will be at the level of 20%, like in Bosnia and Herzegovina and in Serbia, and at the level of 35% in Slovenia. So basically, the slides that I shared with you today are a little bit more on the analytical part, because other aspects will be then explained in other presentations by other speakers today. What is important to say is that all the analytical content of our work then feeded into a new strategy, a new vision, that is based on cross-cutting themes for all transport modes, and these themes are sustainability and multimodality, connectivity, and then safety and resilience. Resilience was also emphasized today as a key topic for this area, but it's not only for the Adriatic-Ionian region. I would say it's a topic of relevance for all the Union. And of course, the analysis also led to the identification of priorities and solutions that also in terms of projects for a better interconnected and more sustainable transport system in the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Zani. Do we have any questions maybe from the transport community? Nedim?
Managed to get, okay, now it's running. Good, thank you. Yeah, I have a couple of questions. First of all, thank you for the presentation, and I think the results are quite impressive to see how, with the implementation of the basically master plan, we can actually, even more, can you hear me now? Okay, good. So basically, you know, it's showing that by investments we can improve definitely the quality of infrastructure, which we knew already, but that we can improve interconnectivity and also accessibility between the whole region. What was a bit, let's say, surprising to me, the impact on modal share, especially on passenger transport. So can you maybe, you know, shed some light in line with what we heard today, Green Deal, sustainable and smart mobility, you know, we want to become climate neutral. In order to become climate neutral, there has to be a more modal shift. So did you consider this aspect, and, you know, how do we reconcile these two objectives?
Okay, thank you. Yes, indeed. I think it is something that is really surprising to see that by investing so much, then in the end we might still have the modal share for passenger transport at similar level than it was before. But this topic is quite widespread, discussed also in other European projects, also considering the significant and ambitious goals that we have in terms of modal shift from the Union for the years to come. And well, basically, if we keep the same cost structure of transport that we have today, then we need to be realistic. So if we really want to improve the competitiveness of rail transport, something has to change. So policies in favor of rail transport or contrasting road transport shall probably to be considered in the future. You may probably know that freight transport is subsidized in several countries. At least some incentives are given to reduce the truck access charges. This is happening in Germany. This is happening in the Netherlands. We have also the ferro bonus in Italy. So I think that this topic should be really taken into consideration if we want to have modal share, a different modal share in the future.
Thank you. Yes, we have another question from Mr. Gariba, please.
Thank you, Chair. I would like first to compliment Pierluigi Coppola, my colleague, and T-Plan for the work, which is extremely interesting. I have a sort of a question which applies to transport and energy as well. Of course, we have different scenarios, and governments may ask for, say, the economic benefits for, how to consider, say, the different projects regarding, say, economic development of countries. So the question is that possible or feasible, to assess the macroeconomic results, I would say, of the different scenarios or different choices? How do you see this problem? Is feasible? Is a problem that we have to maintain, say, in our future? Is a problem we may consider during the future programming period? The macroeconomic consequences. Thank you.
I think this is a very good question. It is not just relevant for the Eusair, but usually also on process by the European Commission, for instance, the development of all the core network corridors is also, this question is also made at the corridor fora, for instance, for the corridors. And there are multipliers, so there are methodologies that allows us to calculate the impact on economic growth and job growth of investments. So this is possible. Of course, then it should be coupled somehow with the outcome of cost-benefit analysis for the specific process, maybe for all the investments. But yes, it is. Technically speaking, there are methodologies to do so. Yeah.
Yes, Sergio, thanks very much for this question. If I may complement the answer that Roberto Zani has given. Yes, as I said, we have methods for computing the macroeconomics at scenario level. So the macroeconomics of a strategy. Of course, this is a bit such a complex and cumbersome procedure. We so far have developed the scenario, and for some of the main projects we have also computed the cost-benefit ratio. We will see some example later in the presentation that will follow on some specific flagship projects that we have considered. Maybe this is, and that's why I'm thanking very much for this question, this could be work for the next step in the master plan development, not only that of monitoring the implementation of the scenario and the implementation of the project, but also providing the Commission, the stakeholders, the national states with some estimate of the macroeconomics indicators of the scenario implementation. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Nedim? Okay.
Can somebody?
I think you have.
No, it's okay. No, basically just a follow-up question on what both of you added. So, because there is a large list of projects here, and okay, technically speaking, if you implement everything, it's of course going to bring to better results. But did you have a chance to actually look at the maturity of the project? Like, where are they in the preparation of project documentation? Can they be, can we start doing them immediately, or there needs to take some time to develop the project documentation? And are these projects actually, identified in immediate priority? Do they have a political endorsement to be kind of tackled right away?
Thank you for this question, because it's also useful for the future, I think. I have to admit that the database of our project is quite long, so it's quite extended, but the availability of the information is very limited. So we had to take significant assumptions to develop our model in terms of impact of those projects. And I think that having a knowledge base for the region and keeping it updated would really be useful. I would like to add that it is not just a matter of future projects, the ones that are still to be designed, so to say. It's also a matter of ongoing projects. We have ongoing projects that are fully financed, also cases from the CEF, and the parameters and the impact changes. So the design, the ultimate design might change. So it's really useful to keep a knowledge base permanently updated.
Mr. Tabarelli, yes?
Thank you. I want to complain against the transport sector, as always, because just each time in the last 30 years that I had the opportunity to discuss with transport sector this scenario, it is also a critic towards the energy sector to which I belong. The fact that there is no connection, no dialogue with energy. For example, I go straight to a point. I see from your scenario, Roberto, that the future of transport in this region, but I suppose also in the whole European Union, is mostly based on internal combustion engine, more or less. There is a reduction that is of from 78 to 75. So, and this is, of course, depicts a scenario where the most important present propellant for internal combustion engine will last for long. I do not dare to tell you which is this propellant. So, and this is a point that is completely different from the scenarios that the European Commission is presenting us towards the full decarbonization. So I would suggest also in the future, Professor Coppola, you are my main target, in order to continue with this huge and important strategy, to work more together in finding solution and also express the difficulty, because I know, I understand perfectly that we have not a lot of choices in these models, in these scenarios. Therefore, I just want to raise this point of these contradictions, of these difficulties. We have to speak out more these realities in our sectors. Thank you.
Thank you. I suppose this is a comment more than a question. Yeah. Is there any other questions, maybe?
No, it is also a question.
You want to reply?
Okay, I would try to give you an answer. First, regarding to the master plan, and the master plan is mainly focus, as it is being presented, on infrastructure. Of course, also infrastructure scenario may change or may be affected by changing in the energy provision. No, to some extent, well, I would say that it is not entirely true that we do not have a dialogue with the energy sector. Transport is transversal. We have dialogue with energy. We have dialogue with sociologists. We have dialogue with urban planner. We have dialogue with, and we have to speak and learn different languages at different tables. So this is partly true. For what concerns the interaction between transport and energy, in the master plan there are some elements that you will find that are mainly related to the port, where actually the advance in or the action on energy has been progressing very much. I'm here referring, for example, to electrification of the berth in the port. I'm here referring to the development of LNG or biofuels for a new vessel, and so on and so forth. So this is, I would say, a starting point. Of course, I agree with Mr. Tabarelli, with Davide, that cross-cutting and interdisciplinary dialogue should feed any master plan, and that the dialogue between different sectors need to be improved.
Thank you, Mr. Coppola. I think Nedim has a question. Yeah.
Maybe just to, I'll try to answer at least for the Western Balkans, because basically we are doing the study which is focusing more, not just on the infrastructure, but more on the emissions, right? And then there is a grid emission factor. Can you hear me? Grid emission factor, because our economies are still very much coal-based, most of them. So even in our scenarios that we were doing, even if you would like change everything to the electric vehicles, what is actually show that your greenhouse gas emissions would increase because of the grid emission factor and because of our so poor sources of. So basically, between what we were, as I said, we kind of focused more on this. There has to be a parallel process. You know, we have to work together with you to see how can we deploy more of the alternative fuel infrastructure. But then again, we also have to see how to get rid of the old cars and get more, let's say, cleaner internal combustion engines. But we cannot just change. Tomorrow, if you change everything, the situation would be even actually worse than it is now. So.
Thank you. I think we should go forward because of the time limitation. I will.
There is another question. Then I think.
Sorry. Oh, I didn't see that. Please.
Thank you. Now, a few comments on what was said here when it comes to our country. Do we have mature projects? I believe we have. And this month, for the first time, we'll also approve with the government that made it public as well, NSPP, the National Single Project Pipeline. But there is a but, because some of the mature projects, which has been prepared 2 or 3 years ago, have become a little bit out of date, because as you know, a lot of important raw materials in the construction industry has dramatically been increased. And this is also slowing a little bit down some project under implementation, because quantity of builds has to be revised. Second, when we come to considering the new elements on energy, I believe we have been focusing on those, especially even in the national EPA programming, as well as WBIF, because we are now proposing new requests for the electrification of the railways. The first one is Tirana-Durrës, which is under reconstruction, but as well as for the other 2 segments, Vor-Haniotit, and hopefully also Durrës-Rogojin. But also last week, it was a deadline to submit for the first time for Albania an operational program. We are submitting one in energy efficiency, and out of 3 area of actions, one is starting to implement EV columns on our national road network. EU already established that in every 60 kilometers that should be such an infrastructure. Our National Road Authority has made a plan that at least in the national network we have identified 59 points where the EV columns should be installed, and with this operational program, which is 62% EPA grants and 38 from Albanian government, we are going to go in this way. And as well, The new port of Porto Romano, which is for us a top priority, will be completely under cold ironing since the beginning. We are trying also to introduce cold ironing in some limited installs that we have, but at least with the new port, we'll start from the scratch with cold ironing. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other question? No. No, we can continue now. I give the floor to Mr. Coppola to address you and to give you the introductory speech, for the labeled project for transport in the Adriatic Union region.
Thank you, Jovic. I will keep it short and then leave the floor to Mr. Siciliano for a description of some projects that we have identified. As said, just let me introduce what actually is the Eusair labeled project and what actually are the project that is included in one of the publications that has been delivered today. So the master plan, as said, has the ambition to share a vision of a transportation system in the region. But according to this vision, the master plan is also functional to the identification of projects that has macro-regional relevance. And we will see what actually these mean for us. We have seen that from the analysis shown and the map presenting the accessibility and the interconnectivity index, the region, the Adriatic Ionian region, geographical diverse area characterized by mountains, insular and coastal areas, needs investment on infrastructure in order to bridge up the accessibility gap that nowadays affect some areas and that also in the future, in the optimistic scenario of the extended core network, will still be affecting some regions. In fact, better transport connection are a compelling needs for the macro region. Connectivity is a key asset for the Western Balkan, also within the enlargement process. The Transport Master Plan shows that there are significant potential for quality improvement and better integration, particularly for rail transportation that is lagging behind the EU average, both in terms of infrastructure, in terms of standards, and in terms of modal share, as it has been pointed out in the discussion before. Moreover, in many Eusair areas, and especially in the Western Balkans, there are poor quality and unsafe roads. The need for adequate, also the capacity of airport to sustain tourist development, and various bottlenecks have limited so far the development and the opportunities stemming from intermodal transport and from the motorways of the sea components throughout the region. In this respect, let me stress out some concepts that have been already remarked. The importance of the macro-regional perspective. We believe that national programs and the local action can only partially address the above challenges, whereas major investment in infrastructure makes sense and can be justified only if looked from a macro-regional perspective. In some cases, even bilateral cooperation may not be sufficient to overcome the bottlenecks and to promote connectivity and cooperation among countries that has the common interest. So wider micro-regional cooperation is needed to provide service and benefit to all the Eusair countries. In here, Pillar 2, Eusair Pillar 2 has contributed with studies, analysis to improve or to give views on how to improve connectivity, integration, cohesion within the Adriatic and Ionian region by identifying and monitor some projects that we have deemed of macro-regional relevance. In fact, the transport subgroup has and the thematic steering group of Pillar 2 has labeled 58 projects, as it was recalled this morning, including 27 infrastructural projects, in some cases corridors, for improving accessibility to TEN-T network with a particular attention to the last mile connection, and also intermodality between modes of transport. Moreover, we have also looked at what we have called soft measure, and we have identified 31 soft measures that are small-scale pilot action, service, facility, and feasibility study, enhancing cross-border connection, improving safety, enhancing and testing promoting transport digitalization solution to overcome some structural gap and improve the quality and the safety of transport. That is one of the key elements also included in the master plan. Now, the complete open list of the transport Eusair labeled project can be found in the book that you have received this morning in the annex. In this session today, we would like to present 3 examples of Eusair labeled project, namely the Adriatic-Ionian motorway, the completion of Corridor 8, including the mentioned Tirana-Durrës railway section, the Adriatic-Ionian cycle route, that is one of our identified flagship projects. So it is my pleasure to give the floor to Giuseppe Siciliano from TPS class, that is the head of the technical support provided by the Facility Point Italian partner to us, Regione Marche, to which goes our thanks. He will briefly present the focus studies very briefly in order to leave room for discussion. We have also Roberto Zani that will act as a discussant for the 3 projects. So thank you very much, and I think that Giuseppe can take the floor.
Thank you very much, Pierluigi, and everyone contributing to the organization of this event. So if we can go ahead, yes, thanks, with the presentation. These are just a few highlights on the focus studies that we, in the scope of the master plan activities, we were able to carry out at the end of the activities in order to have a clearer view on some of the most relevant labeled projects and to analyze some of their impacts. These 3, as mentioned by Professor Coppola, these 3 studies regard the Adriatic-Ionian Highway, the Adrian Cycle Tour, and Corridor 8. So, as concerns the first one, Adriatic-Ionian Highway, which is also called the Blue Highway, especially within the documents of the transport community. Well, it is part of the indicative extension of the TEN-T core network into the Western Balkans, and it stems from the fact that existing roads on the coast on this side of the Adriatic and the Ionian have been designed and built in the 60s. So in the past 50 years, traffic volumes have increased significantly due to the expansion of tourist activities, especially, and economic development. So as a result, the route now suffers from heavy congestion. It is a strategic project, of course, because it stretches along the whole coast of the Adriatic and Ionian seas all the way down to Greece, passing through Croatia, Albania, and Montenegro. And it has been identified as one of strategic importance, not only at the international level, but of course also at the respective country level. For example, in the Albanian National Transport Plan, in Montenegro's Spatial Plan and Transport Strategy. It is as you can see, I take the cue from the results of the master plan activities which show the interconnectivity indexes for road, and it is clear which is the need of this strategic project. Of course, such a huge and long project is made of different various sections which have varying degrees of maturity. The most mature projects, meaning either recently completed or ongoing or already planned and financed, include both new realizations, such as the construction of the Tirana bypass in Albania or the Budva bypass in Montenegro, and also upgrades of existing sections. For example, the road between Tumane and Kashar in Albania. There are also other projects which have lower levels of maturity, but they are planned and they have high priority in the Adriatic-Ionian corridor, such as, for example, sections in Albania between Murican and Baldreni. Thanks. So in terms of the impacts of this project, the main objective is, of course, to improve the connectivity in the region and with the European Union as a key factor for growth and jobs in the Western Balkans. And its expected benefits are better connection with neighboring countries, the enlargement of the catchment area of seaports, the reduced congestion, of course, along the roads, and hence also reduce fuel consumption and deriving emissions and noise levels, increase safety along these roads, and contribute to the economic development, particularly in the tourism sector. Now, our attempt to quantify some of the impacts of this project have built upon the existing model developed within the master plan. Here I will not go into details of the technicalities of the methodology. Suffice to say that it is nested into the methodological framework of the cost-benefit analysis, which is one of the methodologies in relation to the remarks of Mr. Garriba earlier on, are aimed at quantifying also from an economic point of view the effects of projects in terms of contribution to the social welfare. So it is very important to stress that the simulation for this macro project have been made assuming the same overall demand as in the reference scenario. But this is a prudential approach, because obviously one of the key one of the key impacts that can be expected from the project is also the contribution to attracting more traffic. So in terms of traffic indicators, traffic flows, vehicle kilometers, we see that the roads along the corridor will get an increase, of course, compared to the alternatives, assuming the same level of demand. But at the same time, the overall times spent employed on the road will decrease by 3 times as much. And this is very important because it witnesses the importance of the project for increasing accessibility along the coast, along the corridor. So with the monetization technique of social costs that basically use unit cost parameters for the emissions of transport, for the noise levels, for the accidents and the values of times, we see that, of course, we have on one hand an increase of road transport, which is less sustainable than rail transport, but overall there is an increase of road safety costs. So this category a decrease of road safety costs, of course, because the safety improves thanks to this project. And like I said before, a decrease of values of time, of total time spent. So time savings that overall makes it so that each year social cost will be reduced by almost 50 million a year. And I stress again that these are quite prudential results. Now I will go ahead to the Hydrogen Cycle Tour project. This project is a project that stems from a Eusair cross-pillar TSG2 and TSG4, so transport and tourism labeled project, Hydrogen Cycle Tour, and it refers to a cycling route running along the coast of the entire Ionian and Adriatic Sea, both the western side and the eastern side. And so it connects all the countries of the Adriatic-Ionian microregion. The target of this project, well, it meets 4 objectives of the Eusair strategy. It connects the macroregion, it promotes coordination among the participating countries, it boosts their historical, artistic, cultural and naturalistic heritage, and it develops ecotourism. All this by aiming at realizing an integrated infrastructure, a multifunctional cycle route which is able to serve, give the possibility to cyclists for all types of cyclism, tourism, urban, interurban, sports and leisure activities. It is important to say that this project also overlaps and is synergic with other initiatives for cycling mobilities, both at the local level and at the international level. In the long run, the route will be connected to the local cycle paths, of course, in each country, and also to other micro-regional routes, and as well as the Eurovelo network. The Eurovelo is an initiative by the European Cyclist Federation in cooperation with national and regional partners that incorporates existing and planned national and regional cycle routes into a single European network. And it has 17 long-distance cycle routes. The Hydrogen Cycle Tour interacts, is synergic with a number of Eurovelo routes, especially with the Eurovelo, as you can see, Eurovelo 8, the Mediterranean route map, which is the longest one, more than 7,000 kilometers, and runs from Spain to Cyprus and Turkey. Another project which is synergic with the Hydrogen Cycle Tour is the Italian Beach Italia initiative that was launched in 2000 by the FIAB, the Italian Bicycle and Environmental Federation, coordinated with Eurovelo at the European scale, and the Hydrogen Cycle Tour routes are synergic with 5 out of the 10 projects of the national cycle routes. The sections in this map, as soon as it goes on, no, okay, you can see what sections are already existing and what are the planned ones. As you can see, most of them are still at the planning stage, of course, so there's a long way to go in order to complete this project. This map similarly shows the status in terms of funding, so the funded parts and the not funded parts. We are more advanced from this point of view, as most of the length is already funded. We know Eusair relies on limited resources, so it coordinates all participating authorities in channeling the other existing regional and national funds to finance the identified projects, parts of the flagship projects. And well, Eusair, EU countries draw resources from other funding sources, but they share from both sides of the sea the possibility to get funding from Interreg European territorial cooperation programs, which are the primary funding source for so far they have been for this project, especially the Adrian Interreg program. This focus study also has investigated some possible alternative routes to the planned ones, but the highlights that I want to share with you also especially regard the impacts that are foreseen by the diffusion and the promotion of cycling mobility. Cycling mobility help it's basically one of the most space-efficient modes of transport, because a parked car needs more than 8 times a bicycle, a moving car 28 times more than a bicycle. So the space efficiency of cycling helps to prevent congestion and makes it possible to convert areas formerly dominated by motorized traffic into leisure areas within urban and peri-urban areas. Within the Pan-European Master Plan for Cycling Promotion, it has been calculated that reducing congestion by doubling cycling will yield indirect economic benefits for almost 5 billion at the European level. Also, within sustainable mobility effects, it is important to remark, of course, that cycling promotes a healthier lifestyle, which is also a very important effect. It contributes to reducing emission. It has been calculated that doubling the current cycling rate will reduce greenhouse gases emissions by 8 million tons of CO2 per year at the European level. We have strong economic impacts, not only in the cycling industry itself, whose current value in Europe has been estimated at 13 billion euros, but especially in cycle tourism, whose value is 4 times as much. And then also it allows to saving costs in terms of mobility infrastructure. Replacing car trips with cycling trips reduces road construction and deriving capex and maintenance cost for municipalities. Urban freeway can cost up to 200 times more than a high-quality cycling lane in a city. And finally, it contributes a lot to job creation. At the Pan-European region, approximately 750,000 jobs are related to cycling, and if we double the modal share of cycling in the European Union, there would be an added 400,000 jobs created. Also, daily cyclists ride shorter distances than they would drive by car, so they prefer local shops rather than shopping malls, and this is a contribution to local and rural economy. How all these impacts that I have defined on a, let's say, macro level can contribute in the specific territories can be suggested by these indicators of the outreach of the Adrian Cycle Tour. This is basically how much population, how many health infrastructure, how many education infrastructure, how many other transportation hubs can be accessed easily from the path of the cycle tour, for example, by walking 1 kilometer or slightly more. Almost 5 million people have access to the cycle route. and more than 2,000 health infrastructure, which is important for emergence as well, of course, as education infrastructure, because it allows students to use bicycle rather than other more impactful modes of transport. Now we can go on to the multimodal corridor 8 project. This is a project that originates in the initiative of pan-European corridors, which have a long story, originally identified already from the 90s. And this is the main east-west axis which connects the Black Sea to the Mediterranean seas, and this map shows the most important nodes. And as you can see, we also call it multimodal because it involves both road and rail sections, but also maritime connection to Bari and Brindisi in Apulia in Italy. In this corridor, which has a length of about 600 kilometers, we have focused on the railway interventions that are needed to complete it. Is only partly complete, of course. At present, there is a single track line in Albania and also in parts of North Macedonia. The line from Durrës to Lin is already in existence in Albania, but needs upgrading. And also new constructions in some sections are required or need to be reconstructed, such as the one from Skopje to Kicevo in North Macedonia. So it is crucial to construct new railway lines and to upgrade the current one in order to complete and modernize this part of the corridor. Like I said before, for the Adriatic-Ionian Highway, there are projects currently ongoing, recently completed, and other with varying degrees of maturity levels. These are the ones that are actually planned, and you can see that overall we are close to 1 billion funding need for these 3 projects. Again, what are the impacts of this of the completion of this corridor? First of all, the main objective is to realize a complete and effective corridor between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean that allows the provision of multimodal transport services across the involved regions. So this will benefit the regions by improving the connections with neighboring countries, interconnected seaports with landlocked regions, strengthening the competitiveness of transport solution that involves these macro-regions nodes along long-range flows. Of course, contribute to modal shift, which we will see is a very huge impact, and hence reduce pollution and other externalities of transport. So again, we applied some of the cost-benefit analysis techniques in order to quantify in terms of euro the impacts of this project. The completion of the rail parts sections of this multimodal corridor will strongly increase the rail, both the rail passenger transport and even more the rail freight traffic flows in terms of ton kilometers along the corridor by more than 100%. And so, as expected, there will be, on one side, the increase of external cost of the rail transport, because rail transport flows will increase, but these are flows that are shifted from the road. So the reduction of external costs of road transport will definitely more than compensate the increase of the rail ones. And also time savings are expected from the simulation. So overall, more than 7 million euro per year in terms of reduction of social costs are expected. So this is the end of the presentation now, and of course I'm open to discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Siciliano. Please, Mr. Zani, now.
Yes, thank you. Well, thank you very much for your presentation. I think that the three projects are very relevant, but I would like to clarify with you on some points which I think are of relevance for all the audience. So I put two questions directly to you also in order to be as short as possible. The first question is, we all know that maritime transport is a priority for the region, for tourism, because we have cruise ports, among the most important one in the Mediterranean, and we also have very important freight operations at the ports. We also have small marinas. Basically, the selection of these three projects apparently exclude maritime transport. So my first question is, how do you see this possible issue? Another thing is, the master plan, of course, is a strategy. When deciding whether to do it or not, the TSG also had to face some discussions internally because there was a need for the Eusair to implement projects. Now that we all know that the Eusair has no own funds, so we don't have money that we can use for our projects. So how do you see also this problem?
Thank you, Roberto. So yes, indeed, maritime transport is a priority for the region. There are many ports that belong to the Core TEN-T network and many others that are anyways relevant in terms of accessibility and for tourism. The three projects that we have presented are all relevant for the maritime dimensions because, for example, the completion of Corridor 8 is an example of interconnecting seaports with landlocked regions, which of course improves the competitiveness of ports. It will be part of the Western Balkan, the future Western Balkans European transport corridor. In this regard, the TSG activities and the master plan have paid significant attention to considering projects that improve the connection of ports with their inland. For example, some of these have been considered as additional projects for the master plan scenario, such as the already mentioned in the master plan presentation, the link between the port of Ploce and Sarajevo, and also the railway connection to the port of Igoumenitsa. Also the Adriatic-Ionian highway and the cycle route, they are aimed at improving accessibility along the coast. So it enhances the possibility for port users, both passengers and freight, to easily access them. It enlarges their catchment area. And the cycle route especially is important because it promotes a sustainable mode in this regard. So that is why it is considered a flagship project. So like I said, I think that these three projects will generate benefits for the whole macro-region, especially because they are synergic with the maritime dimension. And I think it is important to underline here that within Eusair there is also an initiative ongoing which is related to the green and smart port concept, flagship project. There is a study almost completed that is aimed at defining the themes and actions which are most promising for supporting the development of ports, especially with a focus on sustainability and innovation and digitalizations, which can improve the intermodality along multimodal logistic chains and multimodal passenger flows. The second question was about the lack of funds, basically, for Eusair. We know, and that is why I hardly mentioned the costs in the project. No, but jokes aside, yes, we know the Eusair has limited financial resources. There are other funding instruments, both for the within the EU policy, especially the Connecting Europe Facility, the ESIF, and other institution financing projects. Their very important program is the Interreg one, which offers possibility to support financially cross-border and transnational cooperation. Of course, it is difficult for the European territorial cooperation programs to finance large infrastructural projects, but they can finance capacity building, production of strategies, action plan, data sharing, knowledge sharing, also feasibility studies, also preliminary phases of works, of implementation works of projects. So they have a role in this regard, and there is a process ongoing, which is the embedding process, which aims at establishing synergies between the managing authorities of the Interreg programs and the Eusair macro strategy in order to contribute and facilitate the implementation of Eusair flagship projects. So Eusair does have a role in facilitating financing also of big projects, and it does so from a macro-regional perspective, which is particularly important, as Professor Coppola mentioned earlier on.
Thank you. Question?
First and then Gallina.
Yes. Thank you. I have a few questions, a few comments, but if possible, if you could go through the slides in order to be a little bit more in all of three projects.
I don't control the slides.
You don't control the slides.
Sorry. I mean, someone has to put them back again on the screen.
Yeah. No, this was the last one, but we would start for the first one. Yeah. Go on, please. Go on. Again. 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 Go on. Go on. Yeah, here. To understand correctly, the road transport transfer times will be reduced by 3.6% or 3.6 times?
By 3 and 6%, which is almost 3 times more than the increase of road transport flows. Okay, so the flows, the total vehicle kilometers will increase by 1%, but despite this, the new better quality of roads will allow total times to be reduced by almost 4%.
4%?
Yes, 3.6%.
Okay. At least in case of Albania, but also if you go back to the map where the core part, Croatia, Montenegro, Albania, was almost red, those assumptions are very, very pessimistic.
But
please consider that Croatia, Montenegro, and Albania, which was last year among the best performance in recovering tourism from the pandemic level, receives today as tourists 3 to 4 times their population. And at least in Albania, we think that also in some latest development in the geostrategic level in Europe and in worldwide to the touristic flows, this area will be more and more a destination where we believe that the improvement, at least in Albanian side of the blue corridor, will will not ask, but will incentivize more traffic. On the other side, the reduction of time in listing in Albania is by times, not anymore by percentage. So this was my
Ilir,
first
I
comment.
can,
thanks for this comment.
if I can,
I can reply very quickly because we are running short of time. It is perfectly clear, your comment. There are some assumptions that we have made in the estimation of this number that is demand rigid. So any additional demand flow that would be, of course, something that will happen when this project will be completed would have additional benefit. And Mr. Siciliano has shown that these are lower bound estimates. For what concern the numbers that you have seen there, those are average on all the region. There are peaks in reduction that are one order greater for those countries that you have mentioned, that are the red area in the middle, where the increase or the reduction, if you want to see like that, in terms of travel time would reach percentage of 20% as expected. Thank you for the comment.
Also, sorry, I would like to add one more detail to clarify that this percentage refer not to the current situation, but to the baseline scenario as defined in the master plan, which includes the current situation plus all the planned mature projects. So the difference is marginal to the ones that are not so mature to be included in the baseline scenario. So overall, I think it's promising.
On the cycle route, just a comment as a traveler. On the Crete, you have it in the south of the island or in the north, the route?
To be honest, I have to check the map because I don't...
Georgios, do you agree that in the Crete should be in the south of the island, this cycle route?
Yeah, it is. From the planned one is in the southern
south?
part, but it is not shown in the presentation. But alternative routes also have been analyzed in our focus study
because
in order to make it so that
avoiding the
more,
north part,
more outreach is needed.
Heraklion,
Anyway,
Hania,
this is the
Refugio,
plans.
anyway. Now, coming to something which is true, how we could push the financing. It was mentioned by you correctly, Interreg. And at least, I believe, since we consider this as a priority, we may come out with a declaration, at least asking DG Regio and DG NEA, that since in all Interreg and IPA CBC, we are now currently in approving the financial agreements, managing authorities could be pushed to work all with strategic projects on this priority, or to have, during the life of the implementation, dedicated calls to support the cycled route at least up to the level of detailed design if there are not resources for the infrastructural work. Is a proposal. And please, going back to the third one of the Corridor 8, you are saying there that the rail freight transport will be increased by something about 115%. But if this is the case, still is very little, because from Port of Durrës today to Kafasan goes 0 ton. And we are not going to make this investment to increase, because from 0 ton to 2 ton, 100% is 5 ton.
Thank you, Ilir. I would not go any further more in the details and technicalities of any of this project, because the study will be published online, so you will have the chance to go into the detail. Of course, also those numbers are average over the whole study area. So in some cases, of course, percentage does not make sense because you start from zero and then, of course, whatever means could be 100% increase. So the numbers, if you want to look at specific projects, should be analyzed in detail. And of course, we have not time in this session to go at that level of detail. But overall, what actually the message that want to be conveyed by this presentation is that we are talking of projects that need some further analysis in order to analyze and to forecast the real macroeconomics, also in the attempt to get the proper funding to be implemented. There is Mr. Garriba that has...
Yes. Yes, thank you, Pierluigi. It was a very interesting discussion. I have perhaps a silly question, which refers to energy and transport. Who's doing, say, the transport infrastructure? Who's doing the engineering, the construction? Are we talking about local companies? Are we talking about international companies or companies that move into the region and can move into other regions as well? What is, say, the consequence regarding workforce, expertise, engineering? Are the countries, I mean the Western Balkan countries, for instance, involved in these projects? Corridor 8, I think it is very ambitious. It's going through mountains, difficult situations, land which is difficult access. So my question concerns something which is going perhaps beyond, say, the mandate of Eusair. I mean, the companies, the industry, I mean, the engineering, the construction. Who's doing that? I mean, are local companies, or should we promote the local companies, or should we open to any type of bidding, any type of public-private intervention? I mean, is there competition there? Are there resources? What do you think about what I would call the transport industry?
I don't know who could address this question, Sergio, but based on, if the question is who is going then to realize this project, I think that we can base on what actually is going on. There would be international procurement that would identify the company, the group of developers that will realize them. I don't know if this answers your question, if this is your point in terms of whether the impact of the realization of this project in the realization phase, so what are called spending effect, would go in the country or let's say outside. For what concerns the complexity of the corridor, we are clearly aware that actually it crosses area, mountainous area, where it could be difficult. But Corridor 8 has been set as a priority in the vision of the Commission for Trans-European Network in the Balkans. And I think we have other examples, particularly in Italy, of complex projects that are crossing the Alps and that have been successfully implemented or being implementing. There was another comment, I think.
Thank you. No, just coming to the maritime transport, and as an example that how what we discuss here, we are approaching and complementing with different EU-funded intervention. And since I have here Dr. Claudio Polignano from Regione Puglia, which will be unfair not to mention that already in the new South Adriatic, together with Montenegro, Albania, and Regione Puglia, we are defining as a strategic project the safety within this area because we are aware that more maritime transport will be there, and consider that those are priorities coming from this very important forum and macro-region strategy. Already we are preparing to dedicate more resources to the safety and to the reaction in case of different unpleasant events, both in environment, in goods and people's life. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, we have our next speaker and last speaker, Mr. Coppola. So please.
Thank you, Jovic. I have this very uncomfortable role of making the last intervention. That is what actually separates us from the lunch break. But I would try to keep it shortly. And if we can have the slides, I would try to rescue some delay that we have had in this session. Basically, the third part of this session, thematic session on transport, is dedicated to the revised Eusair action plan for Pillar 2, and in particular the contribution of transport. The summary of the topic that I will touch with regard very briefly the methodology that we have followed in order to revise the current action plan of the Eusair, the main topics, challenges, and concluding with some guidelines for the priority action that have been identified. So the methodology, just one word. This was a very important exercise that I am defining a coordinated, multi-level and inclusive process, a best practice in which actually we interact as thematic steering group, to which goes my sincere thanks, particularly to Jovic Rakic and to Jasmine Kirkova, that are the co-coordinator of the pillar. Actually, we have the chance in this exercise, once receiving the, let's say, the methodology, the template, the instruction for upgrading the current action plan. We had many meetings within the TSG, but also bilateral meetings in which also external experts from each country participated and gave us insight in order to understand what actually are the current needs, the compelling needs of each country that should be addressed in the new action plan of the Eusair. We had a preparation, we had an intermediate report that was first shared with the revision working group in order to receive feedbacks, and now we have this consolidated report that has also included the inputs from the energy subgroup. It is one of the publications that is available here, and that has been delivered to the governing board and to the revision working group for the followings. Actually, the report includes the new topics for this, the action plan, the challenges, and the priority actions. Let me review very quickly, starting from topic 1, that is a topic that has been confirmed. Maritime transport was a priority also in the previous action plan. Here we have just adapted based on the outcomes and the result of the of the master plan, and also of what our knowledge, as our knowledge improved in the years, we have actually reviewed the priority action. And here you have an example of the challenges that we have identified, and the challenges that that we have identified within the pillar, and some priority actions. Namely, this goes from the increase of safety and security in ports operation, and improving resilience of infrastructure. For example, For example, improving and harmonizing the traffic monitoring and management system, and implementing telematic application to improve safety and security. Challenges number 2 is to improve capacity in selected ports where we are expecting increase of volumes by means of new infrastructure, but also information ECT intervention, so telematics and information communication technology upgrading. Last but not least, greening ports, and this is something that has been already mentioned in the presentation and in the talks that we have been listening today. This include action for initiative of circular economy in the port, waste management, optimization of energy consumption, and action for greening logistic in the port, as well as develop cold ironing solution, as it has been also discussed in some of the presentation that we have seen. The topic number 2 is multimodal connectivity. Multimodal connectivity is also a topic that was already included in the previous action plan. And here we have 3 challenges and 9 priority action as well. The first challenge is to improve multimodal connection by, as it has been said, improving railways connection to port, particularly for freight, so intermodal sea, land, freight transport, but also improving multimodality for passenger in the urban nodes by creating a connection, fast connection between the cities and the airport. There is the second challenges that stem from something that has clearly emerged from the presentation of the master plan, for what has been said in the opening session, the fact that the Adriatic and Ionian region present a fragmented railway network, and in some cases poor level of safety for roads. So the challenge here is to increase rail transport capacity and the quality of road in order to get a safer and a more resilient transport system. Example of action here are, of course, upgrading of existing road network, as it has been proposed in the scenario, but also increase the rail transport capacity and quality by intervening on the missing link and by upgrading existing infrastructure. The third challenge relates to the harmonization and interoperability among all Eusair countries. Here, the idea and the action are to provide continued and interoperable international rail links between countries, particularly at the cross-border EU and between EU and non-EU country, and also avoid cumbersome procedures that are still affecting travels, particularly with excessive delay for freight transport at border crossing point. But in the revision of the master plan, and this I hope would be the most interesting part of this talk, is the new topic that we have proposed. That is the topic on urban nodes. This would be an element, this is actually an element of novelty in the strategic vision of the Eusair with respect to the previous action plan. That actually means moving the focus from the connection between states to the nodes in which, so the cities in which people actually live. The objective, in fact, is to, as you can read, is to promote sustainable urban mobility, a solution that could reconcile the opportunity coming from the technological development in order to live and to create more livable city, more sustainable mobility. Actually, the need and the idea of introducing this new topic stemmed from some trends and signals that come from the society and from the market. Well, the most urgent trends was the urban sprawl and the auto-oriented city development that we are all been facing, and that is creating in years traffic congestion, reduce road safety, pollution, and climate change. The second one are more a global trend in urban mobility that is at the level of signal. We are getting a lot of signals that could in few years maybe become again urgent matter of attention, urgent criticalities. I'm here referring to population aging that would require in the future new mobility services for elderly. The impact on mobility of new lifestyle, digital-oriented and ubiquitous connected, that in a way could represent also an opportunity. Think, for example, at the smart working, that in a way are in reducing the demand volumes is also helping to reduce and alleviate the congestion of some cities, as well as the new demand pattern, multimodal, multi-purpose, and in some cases multi-city, that are increasing the demand volume and also changing the patterns with an additional complexity for the urban planner and the transportation planner. We have identified and discussed within the revision of the action plan some possible actions, like, for example, the developing of multimodal hubs for urban mobility, the development of platform for providing multimodal integrated service. Here the mass platform are an example, exploiting the availability of big data and the possibility of integrating this data not only for providing integrated solution for mobility, but also for creating and businesses to sell door-to-door travels, and so tickets instead that station to station. So travels including different modes, different service, and acquirable in one single transaction. Of course, when speaking about urban mobility, electrification and the use of biofuel is also at stake, as well as, and this is a topic that is gaining a lot of attention among urban planners, rethinking the use of urban space. Note that we are a generation that has grown with a concept of the road as an urban space conceived for the car, conceived for vehicles. Actually, the street, the road are urban space, and as such could be spaces for citizens, for people to live, for people to work, for people to enjoy. And this concept of road as something that could be prioritized in use for people rather than for vehicles is something that is gaining attention, and there are a lot of experience all over Europe. The picture that you see is how a square in Milan has been reshaped in order to cope with also crossing vehicles, but promoting activities for people. In all this scenario, of course, technology play and may play in a close future a key role. I'm here referring to the autonomous driving vehicles that are something that could help to improve sustainability of urban transport, particularly if introduced in an integrated way to enlarge the catchment area of a mass rapid transit station, and also if we want to be more futuristic but not as such, the urban air mobility, so the using of drones for moving people from place to place in the urban context. So in this scenario, the proposal of a topic on urban nodes as well include 3 challenges and 9 actions related namely to the improvement of local transit network and services by, of course, realizing infrastructure where needed for mass rapid transit, I mean tram and metro, but also promote the diffusion of integrated fare and single ticketing solution, mobility as a service, MaaS, that could improve the quality of service. Second action is boosting the renewal of buses, of vehicles. We have seen from some numbers that has been shown that particularly in the Western Balkan, the average age of vehicles is between 15 and 20 years. That is out of the normal lifetime of a bus that should be no longer than 12 years. Electrification and use of alternative fuels, of course. Second challenge is promoting active mobility. As pillar, we have identified the cycling as and the development of cycling infrastructure as a flagship project also for interregional transport, and you have seen the example in the previous presentation, but cycling, of course, is also a mean of transport for urban travels, particularly integrated with mass rapid transit. This means creating a station, in the station the possibility to leave, to lock your bike, but also improve the rolling stock, the trains, in order to carry on the bicycle. Of course, there is an issue that relates to safety of cyclists and pedestrians, and this is an issue that should be taken into serious consideration, and for which I think there is room also for small-scale application and other ETC project and tests. Last but not least, we have the uptake of technological and sustainable urban mobility solution that include all those applications that make use of ECT technology in order to improve existing infrastructure and service. And I'm here including also city logistics. So the promotion of solution that could optimize the delivery of goods, not only to retailers, but also to directly to end user. Of course, details of all these challenges and action are included in the book. I would like to stop the presentation here, and of course, myself, but also the other coordinators, the technical support involved in this revision are available for discussion during the lunchtime. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope we managed to tackle the issue of how to develop a transport master plan and how that shares the vision of future transport system in the Adriatic Union region. Sorry, I will briefly sum up the session by bringing some of its achievements. Based on national plans and EU strategies, the master plan has identified transport scenarios for 2030-2040, and the projects to be prioritized in order to cope with the transport and mobility needs of the Adriatic Ionian region. The second one probably is the priority projects that have different degrees of maturity and different possibilities of accessing the IPA funds, and that they have been identified. There have been identified 58 relevant projects from the that were labeled. Also, that were being monitored and made focus on some of them. The three of them were presented by Mr. Siciliano. Based on the outcomes of the master plan, we have identified the topics and the priority actions for the new Eusair action plan for 23-27. Having said that, I'll wrap up by thanking you and thanking all the speakers today on today's session on transport, and of course the audience for listening to us, and enjoy your lunch, and thank you very much for presenting.